Hi guys, it's Steph from IDRIVEACLASSIC, and today I'm taking a trip back to Japan. If you saw me do the Nissan Bluebird, you'll know that I fell in love with it. So in my quest to cover all things Japanese, I got offered a Nissan Cherry and I couldn't help but drive over today and give it an amazing review. I mean, it's not only a Nissan Cherry, it is gold. So in today's video, I'm going to show you around the outside of the car, bring you on the inside, show you around on the inside. Right now we're getting a quick sneak peek, show you what's under the bonnet as well, and then we're going to take this amazing car out on a test drive. So it's time to head back to 1985 in this amazing Nissan Cherry.
Today I'm heading back to the land of the rising sun with this sensational gold Nissan, or you may know it, Datsun Cherry. So a little bit like the Bluebird, the Nissan Cherry you see today wasn't the first Nissan, or Datsun if you're that way inclined, to be badged the Cherry. And in fact the Mark I Nissan Datsun Cherry was released in 1970, and this model is basically the Mark IV, and it's sometimes called a Nissan Cherry Europe or a Cherry N12. Now, this version of the Cherry was much larger than previous models and was available as the hot hatchback, so it's kind of a medium-sized car, and previously it had that super mini status within the Nissan Datsun lineup, and they pretty much did a bit of a reshuffle and they put the K10 Micra in as the kind of the super mini, which is actually one of my favourite cars, by the way. I love the K10 Micra. Now, this Cherry was meant to be competing against cars like the Escort, the Golf, and in my opinion, judging by the size of this car and kind of what's on offer in it, I think it probably could have turned some people who'd been looking at safe options like the Austin Maestro. And I mean, I hate to say it, and in some ways this is a little bit more stylish actually. So pretty much a medium-sized, middle-of-the-road option, which today in my opinion looks absolutely stunning, and I think has actually aged really well. I mean, as we look around the car, you'll see that this example is probably one of the best examples I could have got my hands on actually, both externally and internally. So now I always do a bit of research when I'm looking into cars like this. By the way, note that original number plate, so this has come all the way from Collier's Wood. Now, one of the things I was going back to, I always do a bit of research when I take cars out, and one of the things that I found out when I was researching the Cherry was that a derivative of it was also built by Alfa Romeo in Italy, and the Alfa version was badged as the Alfa Romeo Arna, but in the UK and Spain it was known as Nissan Cherry Europe. So in fact, even though we're testing out a Nissan today, it's got plenty of Alfa touches, including the engine, transmission and front suspension, whereas things like the rear suspension, the brakes and the majority of the panels have come from Japan. Now, bizarrely considering how smashing this car is, because for me it's won me over straight away with how it looks and how it's been styled, the Alfa Nissan partnership didn't go too well, and after the Cherry N12 came to a close on the production line, the partnership wasn't renewed, which seems a real shame, because looking at this car now, I'm sure you'll agree, it's really stood the test of time, and you know, it looks well built and it's fared well, and I know that some of you guys are going to be saying as we watch this, well, Steph, that's not a Nissan, it's a Datsun, blah, blah. And I get this every single time. So let's cover off the whole Nissan Datsun thing. Here's a bit of a catch up. So I talked about it in the Bluebird video, but let's have a little brief reprieve on it now, and I'm going to tell you a little fun fact as well. So from 58 to 1986, only vehicles exported by Nissan were identified as Datsun. By 1986, Nissan had phased out the Datsun name but relaunched it in June 2013 as kind of a brand for low-cost vehicles manufactured for emerging markets, a little bit like Snap-on, and what's that cheap brand that they have? Anyway, I'm digressing massively. Now, my fun fact for you as we look around this car is that the first person that ever shipped a Datsun into the UK was actually Herbert Austin, who, you know, had the Austin mark, and it was part of a patent dispute over the Austin 7 Ruby. Now, I always talk about the Datsun Nissan thing in Europe and the UK, but let's actually talk about it in America, because it's a little bit more interesting. So during World War II, Nissan were heavily involved in wartime production in Japan, and there was a lot of animosity between America and Japan. So when they came to market in America, using the Datsun name gave them an opportunity to almost rebrand themselves themselves and come across differently. But there was a bit of kind of in-house fighting between some of the executives at Nissan. They felt that they should just go straight in with Nissan, they shouldn't mess about with Datsun. But anyway, in the 60s, when children of World War II would be buying their first car, and you get into that position where you hook people in on long-term brand loyalty, the Datsun badged vehicles gave them a bit of a chance to tap into that market with kind of minimum animosity, you know, not upsetting too many people. However, weirdly, throughout the 60s in America, they did sell the Nissan Patrol just as the Nissan Patrol. So it's kind of a bit mixed really, and it wasn't, I think they knew as well, it wasn't really the best use of the brand name. Things were getting a bit mixed and a bit cluttered. So in the end, the Datsun name was discontinued to try and strengthen up the Nissan branding worldwide in the 80s. And today we're left with Nissan as a strong global brand and Datsun as a much lower key, lesser name. So now that we've had a good look around this Cherry and we talked a little bit about the Datsun Nissan naming convention, I wanted to introduce you to Jamie, who owns this incredible car. So I actually met Jamie through my Facebook page. He messaged me and said, I don't live too far from you, would you like to review my Cherry? And I jumped at the chance because honestly, this is one of the coolest Japanese cars I've ever had the opportunity to test drive.
Hi, I'm Jamie. This is my 1985 Nissan Cherry, which I've owned now for a couple of years. I bought it September 2017. Really, it was a car that I didn't plan on buying. I had a classic Mini before this, which I loved to bits and owned for about 5 years. And I was at a car show with a very, very good friend of mine who'd acquired the car. And really, I just fell in love with it. The originality of it, the condition, just the pure retroness of it just bit me. I love sort of anything from the 80s, be it watches, trackies, trainers, and gold Nissans. I muttered the immortal line, if you ever sell it, let me know and I'll buy that off you. And lo and behold, a couple of months later, he made the call and we did the deal. And as I say, I just love the rarity of it. They're a car that you don't see really on British roads these days. It's a car that kind of defines a moment in time of the 80s, which I really, really like. And yeah, I love it to bits.
So I thought I'd best give you guys a little walk through the dash and what I can see in front of me. Now, one of the things I really love is that dashboards are a bit of a thing for me, which is such a sad thing to say, but I love them. And this Cherry actually matches my living room because my living room is black and orange themed, and I feel like it's such a great accompaniment to the fact that the car itself is actually gold. So as I have a look at the dash here, you'll notice that I'm going to scoot you in, so I'll bring you in so you can see these three here. Now, for me, this dash feels quite advanced because there's a lot going on. So over here, you've got your hot and cold temperature gauge, and it's nice and big as well, which is actually quite helpful when you're driving along. I absolutely adore this speedo. I love the way it comes round. I think it's just the way it's shaped, everything about it. It feels almost a little bit kind of like that Sputnik mid-century era, but with a bit of kind of that 80s look to the year 2000 feel to it. I mean, I'm in love with it straight away, purely based on aesthetic, which is a ridiculous thing to say, but I love it. I love the colours inside. I mean, it's all very well laid out, and you've kind of got quite a lot going on. I mean, I drive, as you know, an early 80s car, and so for me, looking at this dash, I can tell you that it feels streets ahead. I mean, you've got your temperature gauge, you've got your speedometer, you've got a trip clock, you've got a great fuel gauge there. Your indicators are separate. You've got your little switches. So I'm just going to switch them on here so that you guys can see. So just there and just there. And as well, you've got your warning lights. You've got general things really. You've got your rear demist here. Now I feel like everything, and again it's coming back to what I was saying with the Bluebird, it feels like everything's being very thoughtfully laid out. And there's even a clock over here, which I'm especially jealous of, because I would love a clock in my car. Now as well, and there's a few different things that surprised me, and one of them is that they have built the radio into the dash, which actually I quite like. And the radio feels it looks more like actually like the radio I've got in my Morris Minor, so it looks very like 70s with your long wave and your medium wave. You've got your heater controls over here, so again you can direct the heat, and it just feels all very thoughtfully laid out. I mean, the dash doesn't feel cluttered. It doesn't feel like there's anything missing, and at first glance, I'm very impressed, and everything feels, although it's a little bit slimmer than the Bluebird, it feels very well put together. And this is something that I'm tending to find in the Japanese and Korean cars that I'm going out in, is that they all do feel very well put together, very efficiently built, and very good quality actually. So aesthetic wise only, I am incredibly impressed so far. So why don't we give the key another turn? We'll get the car started up, and you can hear what she sounds like. Now I'm going to start the car up so you can have a listen. There's been an aftermarket exhaust system put on. It sounds insane. I love a good aftermarket exhaust, especially when they add what I think is a good note to the sound of the car, and this really does it. But I mean, I was chatting to the owner, it wasn't cheap, but honestly it sounds incredible. I think it's worth every penny. So have a listen to this. So we'll turn the key, check it's in neutral, so you can hear that there, and she's quite quiet. Now, one of the things that I asked when I got in, I said, where's the choke? And I got told it was automatic choke. And again, for me, that felt quite surprising, because, I mean, if you think about some of the British Leyland stuff, it was still running on choke all the way through to like the late 80s, early 90s. So it feels quite advanced that this isn't actually on manual choke. So I'm going to give her a bit of a rev so you can hear what she sounds like. That sounds incredible. I've got the back windows just propped open so you can have a listen, but so far I'm incredibly impressed and I absolutely love it. So let's belt up, because I think it's high time we took this amazing car out on a test drive. Now I thought I'd show you how the gearbox is laid out, because people always ask. This is pretty standard, so I think anybody could jump in this car and drive it, which for me gives it real appeal as a classic, because I think that it would be very easy for somebody to jump from a modern car into this. So I'm going to talk you through the gearbox. So foot all the way down on the clutch, and we're going to first, second, third, fourth, and then over and down into reverse. So as you can see, pretty straightforward, but I thought I'd give you a bit of a sneak peek on what that looked like too. Guys, I've been out in this car now for about 10 minutes and I am blown away. Right from everything from how sturdy it feels, so when you're trying to get the car to do something, it's so responsive. It will just do exactly what you want it to do. I mean, I'm not used to this. It's amazing. It's so quiet. There's no rattles. There's no judders. It feels, and I don't know whether it's because I've been spoilt with what I can only describe as one of the most exceptional examples that I've ever seen on the road, or whether it's the build quality, but it strikes me as something that keeps happening over and over again. Every time I get in a Japanese car, I get into a great car. They all seem to be very well built. They are attractive from the outside. They're all laid out well inside. I mean, I don't see a drawback. It's great. I'm driving along and currently stopped at traffic lights, but I'm just driving along, and the gearbox is so smooth and the handling is so precise without being this ridiculously oversensitive experience that you get in a modern car. I mean, that's one of the things that I do really hate about modern cars, is that when you're turning a wheel, you can turn it maybe half an inch and you seem to be over the other side of the road. Whereas this strikes that perfect balance between navigating a ship through choppy waters with your 50s and 60s cars into a more precise era. So this feels, I mean, look, as we go along, I'm sure you're probably getting a great sense for it. We are gliding along the road. It's like ice skating. It's gorgeous. I am so impressed by this car. I don't know what to say. Now, one of the really interesting things about Nissan is that the 80s was a really exciting time for Nissan, especially in England, because 1984, I believe it's 1984, saw the opening of the Sunderland plant, which is where they were building all sorts of things, including the amazing Bluebird. And I'm on the fence as to where this was built, so it's something that we're not able to identify, which for me is a little bit frustrating, in a sense that it's frustrating that I've not been able to dig through and work it out online, but it's actually got a build sticker from Japan on it, so I think it might be one that's been shipped in despite the factory being open from 1984. So as I said, the 80s was a great time for Nissan. It was an exciting time, and the Cherry was very much part of that. So the way they badged their range was the Cherry originally started as kind of their super mini. So the earlier Cherries, so this is a 4th generation Cherry, was they were a lot smaller than this, but as they went into the 4th generation, they made these bigger. Now the reason they made them bigger was because they introduced one of my favourite small cars of all time, the Nissan Micra, or as you may know it, the K10 Micra. Now the K10 Micra slipped into that place as the super mini, and this then took that kind of medium, almost the same sort of space as your Ford Escort. Really, that's who it was competing against. It took that space in the market, and I mean, the only drawback so far that I've found is the steering is a little bit heavier than what I'd like it to be when I was trying to park it, and the fact it's a 2-door. But look, it's one of those things that it was very much the era that people did go for 2-door cars, and I guess you would just kind of struggle with getting stuff in the back. And you know, I drive a 2-door car, I know the struggle, but that for me, and that's me really nitpicking as well, because in the terms of the build quality, in terms of the handling, there is nothing I can find to fault this incredible car, which is lovely. It's absolutely lovely, and it's nice to take out an example as well, which has been looked after, because I think you get that true experience of driving a car that is how it should be and it hasn't been messed about with. And I think, you know, you see a lot of the JDM scene, you see a lot of the retro Japanese stuff, and people heavily modify it, whereas this is a lovely example because the only modification it's had is that exhaust. So as we drive along, we're getting the true experience. It's had new tyres put on it, but as you can see when we were looking around, it's still got the original wheels, which is nice, which are badge Cherry. I really like it, and it's strange for me because the Japanese car scene isn't something that I've massively been a part of. In fact, I don't really know anybody apart from one of my very good friends, Kat, who has bought Bluebird based on my Bluebird video, who is in the Japanese car scene. It's a very different world for me, but as I drive more and more Japanese stuff, I get a real appreciation for why people are buying into it, because it's relatively low priced. I mean, you look at Fords, you look at some of your Volkswagen stuff of this era, it is so expensive to break into that space of owning a classic car, and owning a good example as well, that some of the Japanese stuff is still relatively low priced. And when I say low priced, I don't mean it's not like when I was younger and you could get a half decent car for 500 quid or a few hundred quid. Nowadays you're looking at a couple of grand, but it's still an affordable stretch. If you set your mind to it, it's still a very affordable stretch. And the more I take out these Japanese cars, the more I think actually, if you are looking for a first classic car, I think actually it's probably a great shout. Now, in terms of support from clubs and stuff, there seems to be a bit of an owners club going on for like the Nissan and Datsun stuff, and you've got loads of events, you've got retro Japanese stuff going on throughout the year. So there's a lot going on if you do choose a Japanese car. And I think one of the bits of advice I would give to people that are buying their first classic car or expanding out into something different is, when you buy a different classic car or you buy your first, make sure you've got a bit of a club scene or you've got a bit of a scene to go to, because it's great for support if you need parts or you need a bit of moral support if something's gone wrong. I mean, I was always very spoilt in the Morris Minor Owner Club, in that I didn't realise other clubs weren't so big. So now it's one of the things that I always try and cover off when I go out. And I know that Kat's been telling me she's been getting into that Nissan, Datsun, Bluebird scene, is that people have been very friendly, very approachable. And I think that is one of the big plus points when you buy into a classic, is that you do have a bit of a community that you can fall back on or that you can befriend. It's a great lifestyle choice. The only downside is that parts for these older Nissans, and I think, you know what, I'm not gonna put it on Nissan Datsun that it's unique to them, is that the 80s was a bit of a strange time, and things like so those of you watching abroad, so I'm just going around traffic block there, one of the big things in the 80s and like the 90s and the early 2000s is that cars started becoming a little bit more throwaway. So people, I mean, in the 50s and the 40s, you know, you would have to save up, or you by the time you got the car, it was a lot more significant, and you'd be a lot more emotionally invested in trying to keep it on the road. Whereas by the 80s, the 90s, cars were a little bit more throwaway. You could, you know, you didn't have to pay so much for your first car. Houses started getting 2 or 3 cars, especially if you had a teenager with a job at home. So cars started to lose a little bit of value, and with that there was a bit of a knock on in terms of second-hand parts and parts availability, in that people didn't really tend to hang on to a car if it needed a bit more than the car was worth, or maybe a little bit, you know, you might say, well, this car's going to cost 150 to get through the next MOT, but if I pick up a copy of the local paper, I could probably get another car for 150, 200 quid. And with that, you started to see the decimation of the 80s, the 90s car scene. I mean, you know, it's prevalent across all the marques that it is a really big problem. And again, you know, and with that, people don't tend to keep parts, and so on and so on. And yeah, and I think that's, you know, it's something that I would say to people, is that if you are buying into this sort of era of car, I would encourage you to, you know, get as many second-hand parts as you can, or stockpile parts, because that is the only drawback really with owning a car of this age, is that you don't have you don't necessarily have the parts availability. But look, I drive an obsolete car, and I would still recommend it to anyone. I think, you know, if you love the car, take it on, and I could definitely see myself falling in love with this Cherry, because it's great. It's driving like an absolute dream. You know, we're not even having to think about changing the gear. The gearbox is so smooth. So yes, so far so good with this Cherry, and I would give it so far a solid 10 out of 10. Now, I've done a little bit of a cheeky drive out. I'm on the motorway because I wanted to see how the car would perform. And do you know, it is absolutely gliding along. It's so smooth, and it's so quiet as well. I mean, it's a bit of a warm day, which is lovely for September, because usually it's freezing. So I've got the windows open for a little bit of air coming through. But as you can hear, the car is still relatively quiet, even with that aftermarket exhaust on. And there's just every bump in the road, it is just demolishing. It is great. The suspension on this thing is unbelievable. It's such a beautiful car to drive. In fact, it's probably one of the smoothest cars I have had the privilege of test driving in some time, and I'm thoroughly jealous actually. I think it's a car that I would like to own. I can't stop smiling. It's great. I am quickly falling in love with Japanese cars, and it's getting to the point now where I think something may have to go so I can get one myself. Now, it's coming to near the end of my test drive, but I couldn't finish up this video without talking to you about the comfort level inside the car. So for me, I like a bit of comfort when I'm driving, and I think it's because I'm getting old now, but this delivers on, I feel like it's delivering on everything. It really, really is. I mean, the seats are so comfortable. The driving position is lovely, and it's great. I mean, you know, you've got the steering wheel here, it's not offset. Everything feels like, I guess, if you're in a modern car and you're looking to transfer over to a classic, I think this would be a great shout for you, because it feels far enough away removed from modern cars so that I don't feel like I'm driving a spaceship, and I feel like I'm actually controlling the car. But I think that it's got that real retro vibe to it as well, so you get the real classic car driving experience. And I think something I'm going to talk about is something that I've been talking about quite regularly with you guys in recent videos, especially on 80s cars, is this a classic or not? And I would say it is, but I think that it's an exciting time for us talking about what defines a classic. Because classics nowadays, or things that we define as classics, are becoming more comfortable, they're becoming more usable as daily cars. I mean, look, you saw me take this out on the motorway. It flew along the motorway. It was great. I barely had my foot on the pedal. It's, you know, it's an exciting time for the world of classic cars, because we're redefining what they look like. We are accepting things like this into the world. I think we should be embracing stuff like this into the world of classic cars, because it's amazing. It's totally retro, it's unreal to drive, and it's something that's so nippy that you could drive it daily. I mean, you can't ask for better than that, can you? Guys, this is my worst bit of the video, because I've got to say goodbye to you all. It's time for me to hand the keys back, which I absolutely hate doing when you get a good car, and this has been probably one of my favourite cars actually I've taken out in the last few months. I didn't know what to expect. I walked into this with completely no preconceived ideas at all. It wasn't like the Maestro where I thought it might be a bit boring and I was blown away. I just walked into it and thought, well, I enjoyed the Bluebird, surely I'll enjoy this too. And it surpassed everything I thought that an 80s car could deliver. It's been nippy, it's been responsive. Something that I haven't mentioned actually, the brakes are incredible. So I'm going to give it a solid 10 out of 10, and all I can say is I hope you've enjoyed watching the video as much as I've enjoyed driving the car and making the video for you guys to watch. It's been a brilliant day out, and I can't fault it. So if you haven't subscribed already, new classic car videos go up every Wednesday and every Sunday, and I try and test out different things, strange things that you haven't seen on the road in a while, to give you guys something a bit different. I never get anything highbrow like a Porsche or a Ferrari. I get the more exciting stuff like Nissans, Datsuns and British Leyland. But anyway, I'm rabbiting on to you guys, so I'm going to say goodbye to you, and I'm going to say to you, take care and drive safely.